morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We're going to start in another few minutes. We're just going to give everyone time to dial in at this point. Welcome to A Truly Smart Building Doesn't Rely on Wi-Fi Alone, sponsored by T-Mobile, and we will be starting in a few minutes. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today called A Truly Smart Building Doesn't Rely on Wi-Fi Alone, sponsored by T-Mobile. I'm Rich Berliner, the publisher of Connected Real Estate Magazine and CEO of 5th Gen Media. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today. And just a few housekeeping items as we get started. Please ask all your questions via the GoToWebinar control panel. We will do what we can to answer all those questions during the webinar. If not, we'll answer them during the Q&A session at the end, or we'll get back to you subsequent to this webinar. We're recording, and we'll publish a link to the recording shortly after this is over. Today's slides will be emailed to everyone along with the recording. If there's more information about this topic that you'd like to know, please go to howmobileworks.com or iot.t-mobile.com. and you can gain more information at one of those two places. I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. First of all, we have Luke Lucas, Senior Manager of Engineering and Business Development at T-Mobile, and Scott Spagnola, Partnerships, Smart Cities at T-Mobile. Very interesting folks, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this webinar, and thank you all for attending. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Luke Lucas, and he will be speaking first. Luke?
Hey, thanks, Rich. And thanks to you and your team for the opportunity to discuss the blended portion of real estate with strategic planning for indoor wireless coverage. Our goal, as you know, is to make sure that real estate operators are thinking about getting the right infrastructure in place to make sure their real estate asset is smart. As part of T-Mobile's enterprise and in-building coverage team, my team partners with owners and operators every single day based on commercial real estate, campuses, universities, and venues. Our engagement serves pretty much the most reliable coverage and capacity for our guests and tenants. That's our primary goal. Specifically, I'm part of Build Your Own Coverage, or BYOC for short, something I conceived about 4 years ago, just last month. And we conceived it as a pilot program to coach and educate building owners and enterprise to optimize on-site coverage and capacity. The idea is to partner with real estate operators directly so they can create and engage in developing wireless into a master plan for their properties, something that doesn't just include Wi-Fi, that it includes cellular wireless as a fifth utility. Today, on-site cellular is a mandatory requirement, just not a nice to have any longer. The key is for owners and operators who would invest in their own infrastructure. Then T-Mobile signal source and backhaul would be provided and connects to the T-Mobile network. Through these projects and traveling coast to coast, honestly, speaking to almost every size of a real estate operator, I've seen firsthand the growing need for smart buildings and that the way that the building occupants are driving the needs for connectivity, productivity, and last but not least, public safety. This is the first step, at least in our eyes, to a future smart city. and the infrastructure that's required will make life easier for all concerned, all the constituents, business and residential alike. Let's go on to slide number 2.
Luke, before you go on, I apologize. I didn't read the agenda for those folks that are not on the video link, that are just on audio. So before we go on, I just want to talk about the agenda for today. First of all, Luke just covered the need for smart buildings, the smart building scope, which is what we're going to now, T-Mobile's commitment to smart communities, IoT Connect program, smart community pilots that T-Mobile is working on, build your own coverage, and smart buildings checklist. I apologize I didn't get to that first, but all yours, Luke. Thank you.
No worries, Rich. Now we've got the audio listeners covered, and we'll try to get to a majority of that list today. So with the slide that's currently up, today we want to discuss why Wi-Fi isn't enough and why in-building cellular is essential for business productivity, network safety, and public safety. So during this webinar, I want to discuss basically a series of 4 topics. Number 1, the why for a smart building. Number 2, the overview of use cases for smart buildings. Number 3, the benefits of reliable indoor signal. And number 4, T-Mobile's approach to smart buildings, thus a future vision to smart cities. My colleague, Scott Sagnola, he's joined me today in the call. Scott's going to address a handful of things. The preview is powerful benefits and advantages to what 5G and the evolution of that will bring. Scott's going to also cover the T-Mobile network platform to make sure that your building and or your city is smart. And he'll share with you some smart city solutions, some creative opportunities that he's been engaged with that I think you'll find very interesting. So let's go to the next slide, Rich. So first, looking at these statistics, why do we need smart buildings? And what is driving this change? Honestly, smart building technology is designed to streamline maintenance and cut costs. And I think that's where we all see this evolving. You can keep your finger on the pulse while driving efficiencies, which is significant savings, which typically there's about 40% of operational expenses generated by utilities and maintenance. So for the property owners and the property operators on the call, these are things that you're working with every single day. And these are the efficiencies that you're most likely looking to cut costs and save money. Perhaps more importantly today, 70% of the energy consumption is in major cities. Obviously, that is a derivative that then creates green household gas emissions globally. So there's a series of efficiencies here that we can get started in the space. But I think honestly, and I think you'll agree with me, making energy consumption vis-a-vis smart building technology will have a significant effect for all of us. So with that said, this gives us kind of a start to the smart building and, of course, looking at the technology in the space. Let's go to the next slide, Rich. Okay. So this is the smart building scope. And for those of you who are on the phone today without visual opportunities, this kind of gives us an indication of about 9 areas that smart building scope can evolve to. And of course, you're probably saying, Luke, why is this tied into Wi-Fi or the discussion of Wi-Fi? Well, this is going to illustrate why cellular connectivity is going to be the base for the driver, because Wi-Fi is simply not going to be enough for you. But let me briefly touch on all the 9 areas. First and foremost in real estate is tied to people and employees. Second, there's always an audio or visual component. Third, most likely there's going to be some vehicles that will involve charging. Fifth, I think parking is really becoming critical in most large cities, especially here in Seattle and in Bellevue specifically, where we're located, is really a big issue. Next is energy. I already touched on that topic. So how do you get efficient cost savings? How do you be really efficient for the globe? Next is water. And I think all of us kind of know that that's a limited resource. Another element is elevators. And we all have been in an elevator without connectivity, especially on that important call, no matter if it's our loved one or with leadership or decisions. And frankly, that's a critical component. Next is security. Security now is at the forefront of our minds, especially if you're ever involved in a crime or if you observe a crime. How do you prevent crime? And last but not least, building management. And that obviously it pulls everything together in one tight package. So with those 9 as starter examples, the services that you see on the screen, if you have the visual, all of these require high bandwidth and low latency. Cellular is the one that's going to be able to provide that. Commercial building owners and operators deploy wireless Wi-Fi infrastructure today to provide wireless network access inside their facilities, but these services are really incomplete without excellent cellular coverage. Why? To put it simply, it's faster, it's more reliable, it's safer with security, and obviously it's more comprehensive than just Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is an open standard. I think we all know that. It operates in the unlicensed bands, 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz bands, and it's implemented with basically plug-in technology. These enable wireless services, voice and data, but it's connecting to smartphones, it's connecting to our computers, it's connecting to our tablets, digital displays, printers, and Internet of Things. It's a standard that's an option on smartphones. And of course, most of the time it enables seamless handoff between technologies. And I say most of the time. Wi-Fi devices must be close to an access point. That obviously becomes a critical issue with Wi-Fi. Obviously, we know and we've talked about it's unlicensed. And we know that multiple systems can transmit in the same frequencies, the same location. That creates congestion, which basically to all of us is interference. So, as good as a Wi-Fi network speeds might be, they're dependent on the fiber network serving the building and the fiber that then creates a bottleneck if the IT group inadvertently provisions it incorrectly. So yet, commercial grade fiber is costly also as an enterprise, and the connections sometimes are limited. You're not getting more than 500 megabits per second. So last but not least, it's well known that Wi-Fi is vulnerable to intruders and intrusions. Cellular rises to the top. Connectivity plays an essential role in enterprise productivity, network security, we've already talked about, and gives the best benefit to public safety, especially when you have to call 911. So now it's time to create a wireless plan. Connectivity becomes your strategic priority. Your property needs plenty of conduit, fiber, additional provision power as the basic plan. Yes, you can have Wi-Fi included in that as you move to cellular technology. Let's go to the next slide, which I think is already up. And there we go, perfect. The problem for many enterprise business owners comes in the form of spotty service and dead spots. I think we all agree with that statement. Again, relying on Wi-Fi is not enough. You must have robust cellular on-site to address everyday concerns of your business, and of course, if it's residential use, the connectivity aspect. And it has to be everywhere. Lobbies, hallways, work areas just simply aren't enough. And with security risks that we've mentioned, signal needs to be everywhere. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Cellular services are offered on a wide area network. It provides voice, video, and data services to customers everywhere and anywhere. But cellular provides and operates on licensed spectrum, which we all know restricts the operation to cellular providers. That then purchase, own, operate, and safeguard the spectrum. Cellular technology can be used in dozens of frequency bands. Depending on the region, carriers require multiple frequencies to their devices. Obviously, then it culminates into the customer experience. Again, focusing on what is the best experience overall. Network security, we've talked about that already, is obviously a hallmark of the cellular technology. All cellular networks employed advanced security and encryption to protect transmissions and the closed system architecture, which provides an additional layer. Unfortunately, when we look at real estate, new energy efficient buildings that are great in conserving resources like power and water are absolutely terrible for general connectivity. In some ways, buildings are almost too good at keeping the outside signal outside. And I think all of us on the call know that all the network operators, regardless of who your carrier is, the network was built for outdoor coverage with the benefit of indoor coverage when and where you are close to a cell site. Today, we shouldn't count on that. Green buildings now that are LEED certified are usually low emission or low E glass. It's doing an excellent, efficient job for you on the property, but it's doing a highlighted terrible opportunity of bringing the signal source in, which dovetails into why should you have a wireless plan, and of course, Wi-Fi may not be the final fit. Cellular carriers like T-Mobile work with property owners to bring a high-capacity fiber to the building premise. We deploy at least 1 gig of fiber to the property, and much more often we then straddle that to make sure that it's provisioned properly based on traffic demands. Let's go to the next slide. And this slide basically is just a reminder. It's a reminder of our program to say, go to tmobilebylc.com for our latest brochure that gives you direction, instruction, and partners with you on putting together your master plan. Let's move to the next slide. And this slide I really look at is, this is an opportunity to use this slide, and I'll read it. Indoor wireless networks create outstanding coverage and capacity in your building or venue, even when it's at its most crowded. And this is a critical mobility connection that now is part of the revolution for 5G technology. So use this as your starter slide when you're building your master plan. This slide is in short order, basically the first step that you're taking to build a roadmap for 5G. And last but not least, don't leave your business, or if you're a property owner, don't leave your property. If you're a property manager, don't leave your premise or property portfolio behind. As we move to 5G technology, moving beyond Wi-Fi and making sure that your property is equipped with cellular technology is going to be critical and key. I think we're ready to move to the next slide. So here's a list of property classifications that we help with. Our process is pretty simple. From a BYOC or build your own coverage perspective, the property owner, that's you, selects a strategic partner, and that partner engages T-Mobile. The building owner or operator installs the infrastructure just like any other utility or utility-like service, and it's based on 3 stipulations. First, no charge to T-Mobile because your infrastructure is your infrastructure. You own it, you use it, you maintain it, you upgrade it. It's yours to control. And as we evolve in 5G, there'll be multiple uses that you're going to extract data and a variety of operations that you're going to want that control. Second, you don't charge T-Mobile any rent, one time or reoccurring, because we basically focus on bringing the signal source to you as a benefit. And last but not least, we ask as a condition for free house power. And that provides an allowance for us to deliver the signal source to you quicker, faster, and obviously less expensive for us, because if we're sub-metering or if we're installing a meter, that takes time. So we'll bring the signal source, we'll provide the fiber backhaul to our switch, our connection to T-Mobile, We'll project manage the project itself, provide the fiber optic cable connection to maintain it. Those will be our costs. We handle our costs. You're responsible for your costs. We ask that you engage with an 8-page license agreement, and that's as simple as it can be. That is the deal. So, in summary, now you're on the road to a 5G plan. You're evaluating your wireless overall. You're taking a look at Wi-Fi if you have it deployed. You're also checking your dead zones and dead spots in the building for public safety, for robust connectivity, and obviously productivity in general. And so now, at this point in the conference, I want to turn it over to Scott Spagnola of our IoT team. Scott's going to continue discussing the benefits that I highlighted earlier. And Scott's going to talk to you about delivering 5G to your doorstep, in short, anywhere in the U.S., no matter if you're in rural, suburban, or urban. So Scott, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Luke. Appreciate it. So as Luke mentioned, building on what he started, I'm going to cover off a little bit on our network and how you can benefit from it, our current partner program, and how we're incorporating IoT solution partners into T-Mobile's network, and then how those are coming to life. And then a few examples of current engagements and pilots we have with various cities around the U.S. today. So next slide. So naturally, T-Mobile views our network as really the foundational element that's going to enable a lot of these experiences to happen. And so we're currently committed to building out the nation's truly first wireless 5G network across the United States. In an example of commitment to that, we entered into a multi-year, nearly $4 billion contract with both Nokia and Ericsson to help build out our network and really complete that end-to-end 5G experience across the board that's going to be coming to life shortly. And by shortly, I mean you'll see that show up in smartphones in 2019, and then the actual delivery of a full nationwide standards-based 5G network you'll see come to life early next year. And that's going to enable quite a few different use cases that either don't yet exist or are actively being worked on and will be launched again early next year. Next slide. So just to speak a little bit about our network and go into a few details, really one way to think about our network and the corresponding spectrum that's going to be needed to really enable a lot of these use cases is what we call millimeter wave, which is a great solution in the dense urban areas, certainly best suited for enhanced mobile broadband, for in-building coverage, and more urbanized systems. Our existing mid-band network is really what you can think of as our current 4G network, and that enables the majority of voice and data services that are provided today, and also provides that foundational layer for 5G. And then in addition to that, as many of you may know, about a year and a half ago, we participated in the latest round of FCC auctions, and with an investment of a little over $8 billion, won about 45% of that auction. And that was for what was previously TV spectrum, which was repurposed for cellular carriers. And so we now own and have already deployed several thousand sites with 600 megahertz frequency. And that really enables significant propagation and penetration in more rural areas, but also even in city and penetrating things like buildings, the very thing you need to typically cover. And so really fast forwarding from where we were 6-7 years ago as a distant fourth carrier to really leading the mobile networks here in the United States and seeing our competitors follow and really try to catch up with where we are today is a privileged position that we are really enjoying right now, and are excited to really leverage our network and frankly help all of you bring some of these solutions to life to more effectively manage your properties. Next slide. So one quick slide that seems to gain quite a bit of attention is this one, which I think really helps just illustrate, for those of you that can see it, the capabilities of 5G. And so the way that we think about it is on the far left, we have a fixed or home services business. It's going to be delivered that we recently announced, and really disrupting the, I'll say, traditional cable industry. We have the typical and more traditional mobile services in the middle. It's really our core services today. So providing connectivity for laptops, tablets, smartphones, wearables, but even going beyond that and connecting highways or providing and enabling drone delivery services, whether that's companies like Amazon for package delivery, or whether it's providing delivery services, frankly, into or around even buildings for your own tenants. And then on the far right, our IoT or Internet of Things strategy is really going to enable, again, a lot of partners to enable their hardware and software solutions across different segments, whether it's smart cities, agriculture, the industrial side, and enabling them with inexpensive connectivity, again, to provide sensors and more efficiencies that are typically seen initially in the smart city space across some of the other verticals as well. Next slide. So again, as the person responsible for driving the smart city strategy, we really think of this as a bridge, if you will, between smart cities and buildings, and really providing a comprehensive approach versus some of the other carriers that take more of an island approach, if you will, to coverage. Ours is more of a, again, comprehensive approach of how do we cover both some of the in-city coverage challenge spaces like buildings, paired with the growing need for IoT solutions and sensors for a lot of these different cities. So again, we take a really comprehensive approach in wanting to cover both, and we realize that ultimately it's going to benefit our customer, which is what we're really focused on providing today. Next slide. And one of the ways that we're bringing those solutions to life is through what we call the IoT Connect program. So similar to traditional partner programs, we are effectively evaluating different IoT solutions, again, across different verticals, different solution partners, and they range from big companies that you recognize that have their own partner networks like Nokia and Ericsson, as well as smaller, mom and pop shops, two guys in the garage with a great idea. And we bring them into the Connect program and we certify their solutions. We ensure they're the kind of solutions that we can effectively support, and more importantly, that our customers want. And then as we bring those to life, we then offer them a channel, which is our 1,000+ enterprise and B2B teams, to then provide those solutions to folks like yourselves and other customers that are interested in IoT solutions. And that's a relatively new program that we're in the midst of launching, and again, launching some of these partners on the second half of this year. Next slide. Great. And again, just showcasing some of the early stage pilots that we've done with different cities. It ranges from early stage fire detection, and I'll do a double click or dive into that one a little bit deeper here on the next slide. But that was quite an interesting engagement with the city of Los Angeles and working with them, and frankly, how that's grown into other opportunities with the county of LA, as well as even the state of California. And then environmental monitoring. So we have a solution partner that provides an environmental monitor in which the backhaul is provided through T-Mobile, and therefore the actual environmental monitoring solution itself could sit almost anywhere, independent of any fixed line network. And that provides visibility into temperature, pressure, humidity, various gases. And these have been used by school districts to monitor things like pickup and drop-off time, and how that impacts the kids, frankly, that are getting into their parents' cars, or monitoring if it's near a highway, what the impact might be. And then also throughout a city, just simply having more visibility and data into what the environmental conditions are like, so they can then make changes based on that data. We have some autonomous vehicle pilots spinning up near our headquarters in the city of Bellevue, working together with the city of Bellevue to do a pilot, frankly, for the T-Mobile campus. Since we ourselves are growing quite a bit, we have a need for shepherding people around our campus that also is growing. And so the city of Bellevue has an interest in understanding how they can support autonomous vehicles in their city. So they're partnering with us as well as a few other companies to help bring that to life. And that'll likely take shape by the end of this year as well. Excuse me. Smart lighting is another solution that we have participated in several RFPs and worked with other cities to understand how we can help support different smart lighting solutions. Also very relevant to buildings in terms of maximizing more efficiencies by providing, for example, LED lighting control. So if you've already done the transition from high pressure sodium to LED lights, what more can you do to make it more efficient? Utilizing LED lighting control so you can have a timed approach to dim the lights and how and when they're dimmed, again, to further gain more efficiencies there. And then another interesting company we're working with is called Motion Loft. And think of them as effectively a sensor-based company, but provides data and analytics about tracking objects, whether it's people or cars or other vehicles. And these are often used in airports and stadiums. A few of them are deployed at some of our retail stores to understand not just how many people come in, but where do they go when they go in the store. So a direct translation to some of your buildings, where do people go? What's their path? How long do they stay in a certain place when they're there? And this is done in a way that's anonymous, respects security and privacy concerns, isn't captured as a video, but captured more as think of it as a dot on a map, similar to dropping a pin on a Google map, but being able to draw analytics from it, again, to better understand how to maximize flow in a retail store, how to better merchandise, for example, and again, just understanding sheer counts of people and where they go and how much time they spend. So those are just a few examples of pilots that we spun up over the last several months, and we'll continue to engage and do several more. Transitioning to the next slide. This is really more of a showcase in what we've done with the city of LA. So instead of reading the bullet points, I'll just share with you the brief story. So the CTO of the city, Ted Ross, came to us and said, hey, we have a growing concern and issues with fires resulting in and around the homeless encampments in Skid Row in downtown LA, which is about a 1 mile square area. And there's about 30,000 plus homeless folks that live there. But last summer they experienced a market increase in the fires, and one of those fires resulted in burning down a warehouse with about $1.5 million worth of goods. And so that private property owner turned to the city and said, what can you do to help? And so the city knew that they wanted to help, but they were challenged in terms of understanding exactly how they could help in a way that A, would be automated so they could minimize the sheer number of people needed to help monitor the situation, and B, respect, again, people's privacy and security. And so we partnered together with Nokia, which acted as effectively the system integrator, and we spun up a thermal imaging sensor paired with a lot of intelligence built into a gateway also located next to the sensor. And so for those of you that can see this on the far bottom right, we partnered with both the IT department and the LAFD and performed a demonstration at what they call a drill tower. And the net of the demonstration was really, the thermal sensor was about 150 feet away, about 30 feet up in the air, and they started a fire inside of a building. And when it reached a certain temperature of about 200 degrees Celsius, it provided both an SMS real-time notification and an email with a static image of what the thermal imaging sensor was seeing. And that alert was provided about 2 minutes before you could see any visible smoke or flames. So that was really the aha moment when the CTO of the fire department and the chief of fire prevention really thought, wow, if we could have a 2-minute head start on some of these fires, that's a significant lead time for them in their world. And so that advanced to a pilot. We put a couple of these sensors up on 5th and Stanford and 5th and San Pedro in downtown LA. One of the kind of showcase moments within the pilot was, again, for those of you that can see the imagery on the top left, you'll see 5th and Stanford and a fire truck, and then you'll see a corresponding image of a fire. So when that fire occurred, again, an SMS alert was sent in real time, as well as this thermal image was captured and then sent. And the reason they're sent separately is because we have a desire to ultimately integrate into their E911 system, but they can't support attachments like images or video. And so we send these separately seconds later to email so people can view them on their phone, or dispatch can view them on their computers. So that way they have a little more situational awareness of what's going on. But this occurred, and when I asked the chief a few days later how they responded to the fire, he said it was as a result of someone actually calling in, because this was a pilot and they didn't have people manning the phones or the email during this exact time because it was early in the morning. But he told me that there was a 5.5-minute head start relative to the person that actually called in on the phone to report the fire. So that, again, really kind of helped showcase, wow, a 5+ minute head start is significant to help mitigate that risk of fire within a city. So the same could be done for any one of your buildings that might be in an environment like this, whether it's in the city or even a little more remote. We have various solutions that we could stand up and, again, monitor this 24/7 and help mitigate that fire risk. Certainly something that's more regional and impacts California perhaps more than most of the rest of the country. But this is something that, again, could be deployed literally anywhere in the United States. Next slide. Great. So happy to certainly answer any questions, either for myself or for Luke. So at this time, Rich, if you want to open it up, certainly happy to start addressing any questions.
Yep, I would. Thank you, Scott. That was great presentation. So I don't want to put the two of you on the spot, but I'd like to ask from each of you, you and Luke, what your definition of a smart building and vis-a-vis a smart city is. I'd like to get that from you. No right answer, no wrong answer. I've gotten lots of different opinions from people in the business, but can I get just a quick understanding of how you see that definition in your world? Scott, you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to. I appreciate the question. Frankly, having been in the space for a couple of years now, I've attended quite a few events, and it's almost a funny question because, quite frankly, it seems to change every time you ask that question. So, regardless of who you ask, how do you define smart city, whether it's someone in the private sector or folks from the public agencies, it really seems to vary quite a bit still. But how we think about it is really, T-Mobile is providing that foundational network layer by which to build either solutions or connectivity to really provide that framework by which smart cities and the corresponding solutions will exist. And so that's really our core product and service is our network. And while some of you can benefit from the network directly, others prefer to benefit, like the city of LA, through us partnering with a solution provider to bring to them a smart solution, if you will, to solve a very specific use case. So one thing I neglected to mention is the approach we typically take in smart cities, by the way, is not one in which we simply have a portfolio of solutions that we try to pitch or sell, because I imagine a lot of you are pitched, quite often on different solutions. But really, we like to work backwards from a use case or a business need, like Ted Ross in the city of LA when he said, hey, here's my issue. Can you help solve it? And so I think T-Mobile's approach is a little bit different in that we really like to engage and understand what is the challenge, what are the requirements you have, like protecting people's security and privacy, while making an automated solution capable and possible for your fire department to really help them, not just introduce technology, but really help them. So again, our approach, I think, is really laying that foundational network layer and then providing solutions when it makes sense to solve that use case or business need.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's go to Luke. Luke, I know you're shy about these things, but how about your definition of the smart building, smart cities piece?
Thanks, Rich. I honestly believe that it's the components that Scott outlined to me equate to the connection between the constituents, buildings, the residential constituents, buildings that would connect to the city, and it starts with the public safety component. And Scott's outlined that today, but I think there's a number of opportunities, both from the building perspective and the city perspective, where in the future technology, applications technology, and all these things will start to bring to the forefront things that we haven't even thought of. But my starter idea in my mind is how does public safety access and support their constituents, and how do they get there quicker, more reasonable on timing, and of course if there's alerts. And so I think it's evolving, but I think it's a start.
Got it. Okay, so the underlying network is the important thing.
You've got to have network. I think we all agree to that. I think most real estate owners and property operators now are coming into the purview of understanding that, and for the fact that, all right, so if it's a fifth utility type service that I need to engage in, I need it for several reasons, and I don't know many of the reasons that I'm going to need it for, but if I build it as a base and it's incorporated into my real estate, I'm building that future roadmap so that I'm able and capable of engagement when and where offerings make sense to my property.
Got it. So I was just going to, first of all, I want to offer anyone from the audience that has a question to go through the GoToMeeting app and ask their question. But I have a one that I'd like to ask Scott here. Scott, I was at a conference, a real estate conference in Miami on Tuesday, and one of the things that was interesting is there was a number of companies that are that have IoT solutions, but the knowledge of what the network needs to be for them to really make these things into hundreds of thousands or millions of sensors really was lacking. So I got into a discussion about what kind of network the person was running this water leak detection system on. And basically, they've got a SIM card, so they're running each sensor as if it were a cell phone. The future, obviously, is to do this on your IoT platform. What strategy, what network technology are you using for your IoT platform? Are you using a LoRa format? Are you using NB? What's the format that you guys are going forward with?
Sure. No, I appreciate the question, Rich. Quite frankly, it's a multi-pronged approach. So it really depends on the solution that you want to deploy. So if it's a video-based solution, for example, or something that requires high bandwidth, either an existing 4G network today or potentially 5G network, tomorrow can support. If it's something like a water quality measurement or flood abatement or LED lighting control solution that doesn't require much power or much connectivity, but just requires constant kind of pinging of the network, if you will, that's something that we can support through our narrowband network that we launched about 1.5 years ago, and we're the first to do so in the U.S. And that's a really efficient carve-out, if you will. If you think of a highway analogy where the primary lanes are 4G and 5G, narrowband is really carving out a previously unused piece of the spectrum, which is much like the shoulder. And so it's really efficient at enabling small amounts of data. When I say small amounts, I mean the actual amount of data, so more kilobits and megabits, but it can be sent quite often. And
right. So in other words, everything's okay here. There's no water leak, or help, there's a giant water leak here, and you need to do something about it. So that's it's either on or off, is what you're saying. So, and you've pursued an NB-IoT strategy.
Correct. So for the majority of IoT solutions, we can support either, 4G, 5G, or in many cases, narrowband. And just to touch on price for a moment, I don't want to appear as a salesperson here, but just relative to the industry, I think we've set the bar fairly low intentionally. So instead of racing to the bottom, we just decided to go right there. And so we're at 50 cents per month per sensor on our narrowband network. So relative to dollars per meg or gig with other competitors, we really just want to enable thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of sensors that can very inexpensively communicate via our network and provide that comprehensive coverage and support for an entire building. Yeah.
Well, I've got a good lead for you then, Scott. So the other part of it was that this show was, really interesting. And again, these were 300 or 400 real commercial real estate folks in the room with some residential folks too. The real lack of knowledge of things like IoT, CBRS, 5G was really apparent. I did a little impromptu survey on who was aware of CBRS, and there wasn't a soul in the audience in commercial or residential real estate that had any idea what that terminology meant. So I think what you're doing here with educating is really important. How do you see the process from here of continuing that educational piece? And I'll take an answer from either or both of you. How do you see yourselves continuing to do that education process to get the enterprise clients knowledgeable about these things and what T-Mobile's offering?
Sure. Luke, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think, Rich, it's a multi-pronged approach, but I think it involves just evangelism in general to the real estate field. But we also have to engage the support services to the real estate field. So the architects, the builders, the contractors, everybody that touches real estate needs to be educated. And then I think we need to take a step back that says, where do most real estate operators, and I use the term broadly, no matter if you're a developer or even a tenant, where do you mostly engage with? And that's your city, that's your county, that might be state government. So we need the planners to be basically adding it to a checklist. How is your wireless? What wireless plan do you have? Do you have a plan? And how's that deployment when and where you're rehabbing, when and where you're building new, or you just simply have a vintage building of any age and you need to modernize it and upgrade it. So I think there's several sources. I think at some point, obviously, it will trickle down to the real estate appraisers who will say, this building has wireless connectivity and this one doesn't. That will create a value differential, and those people will eventually get educated on that and bring that to the surface. But I truly believe it's everybody who touches real estate.
Gotcha. So perfect example, and this plays to Scott's point, is I did a show a few months ago, and I've been asked to go back and do a panel at the next one. The Light Show West, it's a lighting show about everything to do with commercial and residential lighting. And so obviously they're showing low voltage lighting. But again, at this show, IoT was something people understood, and all they really could say was, well, we've got, the ability to give you an API for this, but there was no real IoT connection in the lighting that even the largest companies were offering. And I when I looked at Scott's slides and I listened to what he had to say, I think that there's an enormous educational need here. How do you guys see dealing with manufacturers and that sort of thing? We're creating the network. We can give you the opportunity to tie to our network using an IoT strategy in an NB format. Are you doing that kind of educating to the manufacturing sector too here, or are you really just dealing with enterprise clients at the end of the cycle?
Sure. This is Scott. I'll take that one, Rich. No, I appreciate the question, and I think the short answer is really both. And by that I mean we have a team at T-Mobile dedicated to engaging with from the very core components in the physical world of the modules and the chipsets makers. So we're heavily engaged with them and helping them to certainly encourage adoption throughout the market for narrowband, as well as other technologies. But we work closely with the ODMs, so the original device makers, and the OEMs, and again, as well as the chipset and module makers that effectively make these solutions come to life. And through our Connect program, we're continuing to evaluate more and more solution partners and helping them bring their solutions to life. And then on the enterprise and B2B side, really, I think it's in the early stages for T-Mobile as well as even the entire industry. So I think it's critical that folks are educated on the various options that are out there. I hear from other folks in the industry. LoRa was one they strongly considered in the beginning because there was promise of it being extremely cheap. I've heard stories since then that it didn't quite work out as promised or as inexpensive as they initially expected because it's a private mesh network. With T-Mobile, you've got a network that's being offered publicly that you could simply leverage and tie into and then benefit from the scale that T-Mobile has today. So I think there's benefits of different technologies. I think now, again, we're in the early stages of people really spinning up a lot of pilots and early stage projects or deploying one or two solutions to see how they work. But I'm hopeful that as people learn more, they can understand how they can benefit from companies like T-Mobile and the solution providers we're bringing to life. And even today's call, having all of you on the call today, we certainly appreciate you spending your time to be educated on how T-Mobile can help support all of you.
Right. So I've got a question that I think is perfect for Luke on this one. Another question from the field. So what is T-Mobile's position on the public safety aspect of this? In other words, we've got UHF radios, VHF, we've got multiple frequencies, we've got FirstNet out there. What are you advising real estate owners to do vis-a-vis the public safety network and T-Mobile's approach, Luke?
Well, I think we see it in two categories. We're obviously not the award winner of AT&T for FirstNet, and potentially if Verizon joins. So we look at it in two categories. One, obviously from a jurisdictional standpoint, when you're rehabilitating or building a new building, the post 9/11 code requires you to have a public safety network in your building. But that is only truly effective, as we all know, once the original call for 911 help is created and into the public safety access point, or the 911 dispatch operator receives it. So we truly believe, as a baseline with your real estate, that you've got to have another reason, again, and a highlight that I've had in the earlier slides, you've got to have good, robust cellular connectivity. Why? Because if and when the first responders get that call and they arrive on scene, if their two-way radios from Motorola or Johnson or whomever aren't operating, their second line of communication is going to be their personal cell phone. And I can tell you personally, as a reserve police officer in San Francisco, of which I'm still, an officer on part-time duty once a month, I go to my cell phone regularly, calling dispatch, calling the fire side, calling other city services that I need to engage in, because I'm inside of a building and my two-way radio is not getting out. So that's kind of the vision, and I think honestly, T-Mobile's another emphasis of T-Mobile pushing cellular connectivity inside buildings for inside connectivity is making sure that that public safety layer is a connection point when, where, and if it's needed.
That's great. Luke, that's a terrific answer. And I think the most important word to wrap up here that you mentioned during the entire webinar is evangelizing. I think we're really in a place right now where we need to evangelize to the enterprise clients. We need to evangelize to manufacturers. We need to evangelize these topics a lot to the entire marketplace. I want to thank you guys for doing this today and for a great presentation. I'd also like to thank Aaron Friedman on my team for doing all the backup in our home studio here. Again, thank you so much for everyone who attended today. You will get the recording of this conversation plus all the slides from this. And I want to thank the T-Mobile team for all its help and support and evangelizing. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Goodbye.